This is a Global News special presentation.
Tonight,
I'm just calling to report an off-site odor.
it was the spill few ever heard about.
I mean, it sounds like a spill to me.
It is an odor release, yes. Okay, we'll call it a spill.
A cancer-causing chemical at what some consider disturbing levels.
If we saw numbers this alarming, there would have been charges.
Just the latest leak in Canada's Chemical Valley.
Wow. Oh my God.
A community torn between jobs
No more chemicals in the valley!
and their health.
I turned 55 laying in a hospital bed to be told that I'm going to have 20 to 24 months to live.
Do you expect that you're going to get cancer too?
Yep.
Anybody who is informed on this issue knows how dangerous this really is.
It is Canada's toxic secret.
There's a reason they call this Chemical Valley. Anywhere you look around me, there's industry. There are 57 registered polluters in only a 25-kilometer radius from where I'm standing here in Sarnia, Ontario. That's both here in Canada and just across the river in Michigan. Industry puts food on the table here and fuel in our cars. But some say there's a price to production. Tonight, in a first-of-its-kind journalistic collaboration, Global News teams up with the Toronto Star, the National Observer, the Missioner Awards Foundation, and 2 Canadian universities to expose troubling levels of a cancer-causing toxin, a disturbing lack of government response, and the people whose health is caught in the crosshairs.
3:25 p.m. on a bitterly cold day in February, and an internal alarm sounds at the Imperial Oil Refinery in Sarnia, Ontario.
We started getting a bunch of odor complaints, and they came in very rapidly. Something was going on.
A fuse leading to a heater had blown, causing a pipe to freeze and split. Nearly 500 kilograms of hydrocarbon gas spilled into the air.
Suddenly, our house started to smell incredibly strong, like propane. I had told my wife to stay inside and shut off the furnace.
The plant went into lockdown. Workers rushed to safe havens, while the smell of gas quickly spread across the city.
Oh yeah, I was stressed.
At Sarnia's hospital, a code gray was declared. The air intake shut down. A surgery postponed. Imperial Oil notified the ministry, put out a media release. People started reporting burning eyes, nausea, dizziness. And yet air monitoring never detected any unsafe levels. By mid-evening, the all-clear was issued. What few people knew was that another spill at a different plant was already underway.
Spills Action Center, Carly speaking.
Hi, it's Dwayne DeBruin calling from Plains Midstream Canada in Sarnia.
Hello.
And I'm just calling to report an off-site odor.
6 a.m. Saturday, and a much smaller plant, Plains Midstream Canada, calls the government's Spills Action Center.
What type of work do you guys do there?
It's a fractionation plant. We make propane.
Odor complaints near Plains Midstream started coming in Friday afternoon, while the city was scrambling to respond to the Imperial Oil leak. But Plains Midstream didn't report a spill until 15 hours later. It says it didn't have to.
Have you determined the cause?
Well, it's hard to explain, but there's a floating roof in the tank, and some of the product inside, condensate, has leaked onto the roof.
So it's a spill?
Well, it's still in the tank. I wouldn't classify it as a spill.
I mean, it sounds like a spill to me. I don't know.
It is an odor release, yes.
Okay, so it's a spill. Yeah.
Okay, we'll call it a spill. It's very contained. It's on the roof, so it can't go anywhere. It's just the odor that's coming off the spill.
But it wasn't contained, and it was hardly just an odor. Plains Midstream hired a company to monitor the air downwind, and outside the Harley-Davidson dealership, over a kilometer away, the amount of benzene, a known carcinogen, reached 50 parts per billion. And while the sample was only taken for a few minutes, if it continued for half an hour, it would have been 22 times the half-hour standard that's now in effect.
First I've heard of it. Completely shocked. I had no idea. None whatsoever.
Most people never heard of it because the city never sent out an alert.
They didn't knock at the door. Yeah, we're open. We're here.
Would have been nice.
It would have been nice. Would have been nice.
I actually went there Saturday morning, and they'd give me no indication that there was any problem.
The ministry was aware, but it defends the benzene level was well below its emergency screening value. And even today, Plains Midstream isn't being held to the half-hour standard. And so no one showed up to check on the spill.
No field response. Well, I'm surprised.
No field response. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. That is pathetic. No, it's not surprising, but yes. That means nobody actually went to the site and looked at it.
I wouldn't want to be working at the Harley-Davidson operation that day.
If we saw numbers this alarming, there would have been an inspection, and I guess there would have been charges.
Obviously, charges should have been laid. There's absolutely no doubt. This is evidence of violations.
But there was no investigation, no charges.
They didn't do anything about it. Absolutely nothing. This is what they did. They filled out a report. That's it. And they just left it.
Plains Midstream claims there were no air safety concerns, and at no time was the public at risk. The source of the problem, they say, they fixed. But Plains Midstream is far from the only company to have a leak. We obtained over 500 government reports documenting industrial spills and leaks in the Sarnia area over a 2-year period.
338 kilograms of ammonia was apparently released, no field response. It appears that the valve was left open since December, so the refinery fuel gas was being emitted straight to the atmosphere. The valve was open for more than 3 months. Crazy. That's crazy. This company didn't receive any kind of slap on the wrist. Sheesh.
What is the pattern you're seeing here?
It seems to me, in looking at a few of these, that the ministry fell short of their responsibility to the public.
Since January 2013, only 4 cases have resulted in charges from the Ministry of Environment. 4. One of them was the Imperial Oil spill of 2014. It was fined more than $800,000 and fixed the leak.
That is the key question. Why aren't there more consequences happening to these companies?
And yet the ministry has taken an aggressive stance on reducing emissions and has targeted a specific chemical, benzene, the very one leaked by Plains Midstream in February 2014.
Benzene is a very well-established human carcinogen. Pretty much any organization that has looked through it have classified it for a number of years as a definite human carcinogen based upon a very large body of evidence. The strongest evidence is for certain types of leukemia.
In July 2016, the Ontario government introduced the most stringent benzene standard in the country. The association representing industry claims it's unrealistic.
It's very strict. It's very restrictive. We can't meet that standard.
It's estimated the refineries in Sarnia pump out 3 to 10 times the annual limit. And so 7 facilities were granted a technical standard instead, exempting them from the new level, but requiring them to implement equipment upgrades.
We're going to do everything we can to limit the amount of benzene that we might be coming from our facilities.
In fact, when it came into effect in 2016, most cities in Ontario didn't come close to meeting the new level. But in Sarnia, the industry's own air monitor recorded the highest annual benzene reading in 3 years, at nearly 4 times the new limit. It's a standard that's health-based. So is there a cost when it's not met? Coming up, is it the price of living in Chemical Valley?
We expected cancer.
And
while they tease and call me AIDA Lockridge,
the local crusader who's taking on industrial giants.
That flare is huge.
We're back in 60 seconds.
My name's AIDA Lockridge, and I live on Amjanong First Nation, and this is the video diary of my experiences here. That flare is huge. I didn't receive any notification on that.
AIDA Lockridge is an unbelievable hero. She is, in my view, the Joan of Arc of her community.
Not sure if you can hear the noise. That's why I'm scared to leave the windows open at night. You never know what's gonna come through. I can feel the vibration. Crap. And it does stink. So I'm kind of directly under Suncor's flare now.
The Suncor Sarnia refinery is currently in the process of safely shutting down process units. During this time, there may be intermittent periods of visible flaring, as well as the possible increase in noise levels. Thank you for using the CARE information line.
For 2 years, AIDA Lockridge has hit record.
Yeah, I'd call that high flare for sure. And then on the 26th, they had a code 6, which is a shelter in place.
For 11 more, she's kept an historical record.
It was hydrogen sulfide that was leaking.
Chronicling her experience in Aamjiwnaang First Nation, a community at the south end of Sarnia, encased by industry.
Sometimes, well, they tease and call me AIDA Lockridge. But, yeah, I don't look like, what's her name, Julia Roberts? I have my own way of getting information.
Many of the plants here were built under old zoning laws that allowed them to be next door to homes and families.
This is Aamjiwnaang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 24 steps. And it's Suncor. It's recording.
Rarely does a week go by that the impact of AIDA's industrial neighbors isn't felt.
This is along the St. Clair Parkway. There was a release of some asphalt when they were loading. They said it just a little bit went into the river and it was cleaned up immediately. But hey, they still got booms out.
A lot of people look at industry and they see jobs.
Yes.
What do you see?
Well, yeah, there's jobs for people, and a lot of those people are my friends. They have all the finest toys, you know, pools and boats and motorcycles and all that. And once they end up getting sick, they just say that's the price they paid for working in the valley.
In Sarnia and Aamjiwnaang, hospitalization rates for respiratory problems are higher than in neighboring Windsor or London. And a legacy of asbestos exposure in the plants has meant more cases of lung cancer and mesothelioma than the rest of Ontario.
By the time I left, we were registering a new patient almost every day. I mean, our clinic almost turned into a cancer clinic.
While the world's leading health organizations say benzene causes leukemia, it's not the only cause. And so proving it's responsible for people's cancer is nearly impossible.
I would love to say, yes, they're at fault. Unfortunately for us, we can't.
Wilson Plain and his wife Dorothy live in the south end of Aamjiwnaang. Their son Jeremy was 13 when he died of leukemia.
You took him to the hospital with a bloody nose and bruising.
And they came back and said, your son's got leukemia. Within 6 days, he was gone.
6 days?
6 days. Even though some of these plants release, they say, a safe amount of benzene, to me, there is no safe amount.
It's my belief that it has something to do with it, yes.
Ron Plain has lived in Aamjiwnaang and Sarnia for 25 years.
I turned 55 laying in a hospital bed to be told that I'm going to have 20 to 24 months to live.
Ron has a blood cancer called MDS. His hematologist says it can be caused by benzene and is extremely rare for someone his age.
We expected cancer. Nobody was shocked. My wife and I sat there in the chair and said, yeah, we figured.
And then there's Catherine. That's not her real name, but because her youngest sons still work in the industry, she's afraid.
It's not right that they entice these people with really good money, and it can take their lives.
Her father died of asbestosis. Her husband is sick now too, and her son died 6 years ago.
He was diagnosed with leukemia caused from benzene exposure.
Well, how do you know that it was caused by benzene?
Because that's what he did for a living. He was exposed to it every time he pulled his truck into the rack. That's where they load the product into the truck.
Do you know which chemicals he was shipping?
Mm-hmm.
What were they?
benzene, toluene, and spent caustic. If he didn't get a proper seal, it would be all over him and the truck and drive down the highway.
Despite all the anecdotal evidence, leukemia and blood cancer rates aren't any higher in Lambton County than the rest of Ontario.
Our health outcomes are very similar to what we see in other parts of Ontario.
But the argument is that cancer rates taken at the county level are too broad and don't reflect what's happening at the community level, specifically those that are closer to the plants.
Suppose all the leukemia cases are people living on the fence line or working in those plants.
For 10 years, a community group tried to get a study done, but neither the province nor the feds would fund it. Only industry offered to pay a portion of the cost, and so it never happened.
No more chemicals in the valley!
In the absence of a study, a new generation in Aamjiwnaang is raising their voices.
Clean water, clean air, healthy
It's hard to imagine a community that was more engaged, but when your adversary is the most powerful multinationals in the world, the fossil fuel industry, it's David and Goliath.
Some people have suggested to me that the people here might have to relocate. What do you say to that?
I said I would, but my roots were here. My grandfather lived here. All our relatives are buried here.
This is a classic example of environmental racism. There's no question. This would never be tolerated in a white community.
This is affecting us all.
And I don't care what the Ministry of the Environment says. They would not move their families there. They wouldn't move into the Aamjiwnaang community. Anybody who is informed on this issue knows how dangerous this really is.
Do you expect that you're going to get cancer too?
Yep. But like I said, well, I'm not going down without a fight. I am a fighter.
Still to come.
Wow. Oh my God.
A city lighting up with its people left in the dark.
Do you think the public is being properly alerted?
Absolutely not.
And answers from the top.
The ministry is doing its job.
Next. It was supper time on a Thursday when the Sarnia skyline started pulsing orange.
Oh my God.
It literally looked like Canada was on fire.
Wow.
From across the St. Clair River in Michigan, Megan Hayden could hear the flames. She could feel them.
It almost sounded like the engine of a freighter. It's like toot, 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 toot.
This is what's happening in the Chemical Valley right now.
It was a mechanical problem at Imperial Oil, as well as a grass fire.
It was absolutely anxiety-inducing.
Oh, they got the sirens going.
Internal alarms sounded. Workers were told to shelter in place.
People were struck with the fear that this place was going to blow up.
That is just ridiculous.
Air monitoring didn't detect any unsafe levels. But most people in Sarnia never knew what was going on. Imperial Oil sent out a press release, but the city never sent out an alert.
Do you think the public is being properly alerted?
Absolutely not.
Jacob Westphal runs a private alerting system in Sarnia.
The public has asked repeatedly in the past, we want to be notified when there is a significant flare. So even though there's not necessarily a risk to me, I want to know what's happening.
His is not the official alerting system in Sarnia, even though it's used by Saskatchewan and Alberta.
I can feel the heat here.
And has proven itself in emergencies like the Fort McMurray wildfires.
This is as close as I can get.
On February 23, 2017, Jacob Westphal sent out an alert. The Aamjiwnaang First Nation, through their own system, did too. The city of Sarnia did not.
They are trying to protect the reputations of the city as well as protect the reputations of the industry.
You think this is an image issue?
Oh, it's definitely an image issue. We want to be seen as a safe community for people to live in.
Each one of these dots represents a home.
The official alerting system for the city of Sarnia can reach tens of thousands of people in a matter of minutes.
Who makes the call whether or not an alert is issued?
Industry. Industry will call a code in. But fire and police, they have the authority to upgrade that code.
Does that happen?
It has, not lately.
Although the system is operated by Sarnia Police, it's funded by industry.
So in 3 years, how many times has it been used? Maybe a dozen? One time. So there you go. It's not being used as it should be.
One time in 3 years. And yet we obtained government reports documenting more than 500 spills and leaks over a 2-year period.
The public does not panic if you give them information. People panic in the absence of information.
The city defends if the public's at risk and there's something they can do about it, they'll get the message out.
Big 3-3.
Happy birthday to you.
By any measure, the air quality in Sarnia and Amjadong is far better than it was 20 years ago.
Curtis getting the ball.
And yet, spills continue, and the level of benzene is among the highest in the country. We wanted to know if the minister in charge would signal a change.
This is not right, but again, it's why we set the standard as low as we did.
Are you committed to holding industry accountable?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What we need to look at is how do we educate business, how do we make sure that they're doing the right thing, and how do we enforce those standards. I mean, there are consequences, even if it's not a charge.
Are there?
Well, I mean, the one consequence, obviously, is if there's a spill, you have to clean it up, you have to pay to clean it up.
Would your ministry fund a study to finally find out whether or not there is a higher incidence of cancer or health effects caused by industry?
If there's an organization that wanted to bring a proposal forward, I'd always be happy in looking at it.
The concern for the people of Sarnia and Amjadong is that after the cameras have turned off, the issue will persist. That people will still live with the uncertainty of health impacts, uncertainty of whether, when the next leak happens, they'll be told about it.
What do you want to see done here?
Well, I'd like these industries to, I don't know, buy the best technology out there. I'd like to breathe cleaner air and to feel safe in my home.
Well, that's it for us tonight from Sarnia, but there's lots more to our investigation online at globalnews.ca/toxic-secret, as well as with our partners at the Toronto Star and the National Observer. And we want to hear from you. Send us your feedback to investigate@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching.